Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Anne and today I'm filming a very impromptu bookshelf tour. I wasn't really planning on filming a bookshelf tour today. I was actually just planning on filming my June wrap-up, which I just did. But then I was watching Books and Lala's bookshelf tour and I got the bug, basically. I suddenly wanted to film my own bookshelf tour, and that's not something I had ever wanted to do before because it seemed like a lot of work. So I'm just going to go with this vibe now I've got it. So I'll first just show you the bookshelves in their entirety. I'm just going to show you the white bookshelves because those tan ones are my boyfriend's and these white ones are mine. So yeah, they're just two regular Billy bookshelves, like a lot of people have them. And that's it basically. Up there you can see the writer's map, which is a really cool book full of literary maps basically. But it's too big to fit on my shelves, which is why it's over there. And then we've got the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series by Douglas Adams, which I tried reading twice and I didn't like twice. So I didn't want them on my shelves anymore, but my boyfriend maybe wants to read them at some point, but they didn't fit on his shelves either, so that's why they're over there. Anyway, let's get into the shelves themselves. I'm not going to take out all of the books because that seems like a lot of work and I'm a little bit lazy, so we'll see how this goes. And before we dive in, I'll just quickly tell you what is what on the shelves. Up here we have my two classic shelves, then here we have fantasy and sci-fi, more fantasy and sci-fi, then here we have my Harry Potter shelf, the graphic novel and comic shelf, and then over here we have YA contemporary, more YA contemporary, Dutch fiction and non-fiction, and these three are all adult contemporary books, except for my little Roald Dahl collection here. Okay, so the top left shelf, first we have a drawing of two guinea pigs, which my good friend Marika made for me. I'll just take that off for now, so you can actually see the books. I've got a selected works of Virginia Woolf, which I've never read. I read Mrs. Dalloway in university, but that was not from this edition. But I think it's really nice and I want to read more of her work, so I picked it up for like €7 once. Then, The Complete Stories of Sherlock Holmes. I read my first story from that during the Magical Readathon Owls edition in, what was it, April? So yeah, I plan on reading more from this. Two giant tomes works of Charles Dickens, which I probably will never read, and the complete works of William Shakespeare, which I'm still planning to read a few plays from. Up here we've got Salome by Oscar Wilde, which doesn't fit on any of my shelves, but I had to read it in university once, so it's still here. A cool Pink Floyd mug. I've got more Shakespeare, Animal Farm in 1984, and another one of 1984, which I really like. I read it in high school and I've been planning on rereading it for a long time. Then we've got a few of the vintage classics. It really bugs me that these aren't all the same color of red, and that has nothing to do with age or sun. It's just how they are printed and it annoys the heck out of me. We've got The Heat of the Day, which I had to read in university, To Kill a Mockingbird, and The Name of the Rose. I've read To Kill a Mockingbird, which I loved. I haven't read The Name of the Rose yet by Umberto Eco, but I really want to, because it seems like a cool book. We've got The Book of Marjorie Kemp, which is boring, but I still own it for some reason. Paradise Lost, which I might read at some point in my life, but yeah, probably not. A few children's classics. We've got The Jungle Book, A Christmas Carol, which apparently is a children's book, Peter Pan. Then we've got Waiting for Godot here for some reason, which is definitely not a children's classic. And then we've got Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which I read last year and really enjoyed. We've got A Room with a View, which I haven't read. I don't know if I'll ever will, but we'll see. Another Sherlock, The Hound of the Baskervilles. The Brothers Grimm, Grimm's Fairy Tales, and Madame Bovary by Flaubert, which I read in university and really liked. I've got a pretty copy of Anne of Green Gables here, which I will just move aside. I haven't read this yet, but I plan on reading it this year at some point. If you hear a strange noise, that's my guinea pig drinking. Perhaps I'll show them to you too in a minute. We've got Le Morte d'Arthur Volume 1 and Volume 2 here by Sir Thomas Malory. We've got Shakespeare's Sonnets here, which I haven't read, and I have no idea how I got that little book. Probably from my parents. Then we've got Angela Carter's Book of Fairy Tales, which I got as a present when I left my job at the bookstore. I haven't read any of the fairy tales yet, but I really want to, and the book is gorgeous. Then we've got a very old edition of Spenser's Fairy Queen. Probably won't read this, but it looks pretty cool and it's really old. Then we've got The Complete Winnie the Pooh, which I reread last year. And then we've got a cool edition of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I read this in university as well, I believe. But I really like this edition, and I really liked the story as well. Now we've arrived at the first fantasy shelf. Over here I've got a few of the new Book Depository bookmarks, which I really like. I usually don't really like them, but these are really cute. They say, like this bookmark, I'm usually tucked in a book, which I think is cute. And sorry, I don't have time today, I'm booked. And then I'm reading from cover to cover. It takes pages. I think the artwork on these ones are really cute as well. So onto the books. Over here we have The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer and a little thing with an A and a monkey, which I've had since I was born. I read these a couple of years ago and I really liked all of them, and I actually wrote my master's thesis on Cinder and 2 other retellings of Cinderella. I think these books are really gorgeous as well. I've also got Fairest here, which I believe is the one about Queen Levana, and Stars Above, which are some short stories from this universe. Then we've got the entire Throne of Glass series, including The Assassin's Blade, which are some short stories as well. These books are heavily debated, I know. I really like the first 2, and after that I still like the books, but they became a little more problematic for me, and at the end, at Kingdom of Ash, I still really enjoyed it, but that's more because I loved some of the characters and because I'd spent so much time in the world than because I still loved the story so much. We've got the Illuminae files, which are all 3 absolutely gorgeous, and I adored these books. I think I gave all of them 5 stars, although I did like Obsidio a little bit less. Then we've got the Scorpio races, which I acquired, I think, in December in a Secret Santa thing with some Dutch bookstagrammers. I haven't read this one yet, but I plan on doing so, I think, during the Nudes Readathon in August. Of course, we've got The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater, which is a series I adore. It's one of my favorite series of all times. And then we have All the Crooked Saints. I have read this one, but I was a little disappointed by it, actually. And then we've got Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares. I loved both of them. Muse of Nightmare has sprayed edges, which I didn't know when I ordered it, so that was cool. So on to the next fantasy and sci-fi shelf. I've got 2 copies of The Hobbit over here. I got this one from my best friend when I graduated university, and this one came with these 3 in a box set, which I ordered, I think, last month or maybe the month before. I'm reading the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the first time this year. Then we have the Wayfarers trilogy. I read this one in June, and I think it's absolutely gorgeous, and it was a 5-star read for me. Go watch my June wrap-up if you want to know why. And I ordered the second 2 books, A Close and Common Orbit and Record of a Spaceborne Few, right after finishing this one. Then we have Stardust by Neil Gaiman, which is the only Neil Gaiman I own, apart from a few of the Sandman graphic novels. I'm planning to read this for the reading rush later in July. Then we've got A Wrinkle in Time, which I've never read, and I'm not sure anymore why I picked it up. I think because I wanted to read it at some point, but I haven't done that yet. Then we have, oh right, I have another Neil Gaiman, duh, it was right in frame. This is Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, which I bought because the series was coming out and it seemed like a cool way to introduce myself to both Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, but I haven't read it yet. Then over here we have my only 2 V. Schwabs, which are This Savage Song and Our Dark Duet, the Monsters of Verity duology. I read both of these this year and absolutely loved them. Then we have Children of Blood and Bone. I had to have this when I bought it last year, I think, but I still haven't read it, so yeah, there's that. Same goes for Heartless by Marissa Meyer. I had to have this one as well, but I still haven't read this one either, and I really want to get to it this year because it's getting ridiculous now. Then we have the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. I've read both of these and I absolutely love them. And earlier this year I bought the Shadow and Bone trilogy because of the Netflix series they're making, and it seemed like a good time to finally read those books. I haven't yet, but Shadow and Bone is on my July TBR, so hopefully I'll be able to get to it. Then we have a cute La La Land bookmark, which says, "Here's to the ones who dream, foolish as they may seem." La La Land is my favorite film of all time, so this bookmark always makes me happy. And then at the end we have the Hunger Games trilogy. Now we're moving on to the first young adult contemporary shelf. Over here we have my Benjamin Alira-Sanz collection. I have 4 books by him, and Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe is among my favorite books ever. And the only one I haven't read yet is He Forgot to Say Goodbye, which I hope to get to this year. Then we have Dear Martin by Nick Stone, which I haven't read yet, but I plan on reading that during the Magical Readathon in August. Then we have On the Comma by Angie Thomas, which I read earlier this year. I had the paperback edition, but then I found this one, which is signed, in my local bookstore, so I had to buy this one and I gave my paperback to my parents. Of course, The Hate You Give, which is one of my favorite books. We have The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness, which I read this year and really liked. When Dimple Met Rishi. I really want to read some of Sandhya Menon's other books, because I really like this one. The Astonishing Color of After, which I haven't read yet, but really want to read. The same goes for History Is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera. I read They Both Die at the End and really loved that one. And we have the To All the Boys I've Loved Before trilogy, which I liked but wasn't blown away by. It was okay, I guess. I gave the first 2 books 3 stars, I think, and the last one 4 stars. We have A Broken Bookmark, and then the French Kiss trilogy, which I really liked. And then we have all my John Green books. My favorite one is Turtles All the Way Down. And then there's Proud, which hasn't got its own place yet. I read it in June and really liked it. Now we've come to the second YA contemporary shelf. We've got Ash by Melinda Lowe and The Selection by Kira Kaas, which are both Cinderella retellings. I used them both for my master's thesis as well, and I didn't like either of them. And I actually really hate The Selection. Sorry about that. Then we've got My True Love Gave to Me, which is an anthology of winter stories. We've got Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I really like this, but for some reason I haven't been inclined to pick up the rest of the books in the series. And we've got some Becky Albertalli books, The Upside of Unrequited, Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, and Leah on the Offbeat. Simon is actually the only one I've read so far. And then we have Only Ever Yours by Louise O'Neill, which I read in June. I talked about it in my June wrap-up. I have some very conflicting thoughts on this book. Then we have the 2 books by C.G. Drews. This is actually the first one, 1,000 Perfect Notes, which is really good, but my favorite is The Boy Who Steals Houses. The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky? I don't know. It's an unpopular opinion, but I actually don't really like this one. I read it twice because the first time I thought, well, I'm probably wrong, everybody loves it, perhaps I might have missed something, but this is a 3-star read for me. I'm kind of indifferent about it. And then we have Ready to Fall by Marcella Pixley, We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, which I really liked. The Sun is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon, of which I have a book versus film review up on my channel. I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson, which I haven't read yet. And then here we have my Rainbow Rowell collection, Eleanor and Park and Fangirl, which I both read a couple of years ago, and Carry On, which I read last month. And these are... I never know what to do with these 2, because Landline and Attachments are her adult novels, but it doesn't feel right to separate my Rainbow Rowell books, so they are here on the young adult contemporary shelf. And then here we have Almost Midnight, which are 2 festive short stories. And here is I'll Be There For You, which is a non-fiction book about friends. So it has absolutely nothing to do with young adult contemporary, but here it is. We come to the bottom shelf of this bookcase, which might not be of much interest to most people because it is my Dutch books and my non-fiction books. Up until here is Dutch, so I won't go over all of them because that's probably not interesting to most of you. Then here we have The Mad Woman in the Attic by Gilbert and Gubar, which is actually a feminist non-fiction book, quite groundbreaking at the time. I have vowed to one day read this entire thing, but up until now I've only read fragments for my university courses. Then we have Status Anxiety by Alain de Botton, which I haven't read yet. We've got Notes from a Small Island by Bill Bryson, which is hilarious. How to Be a Heroine by Samantha Alice. I picked this up on a whim when I was on holiday in Dublin, but I loved it so much. It's a wonderful book. The title, like I said, is How to Be a Heroine, or What I've Learned from Reading Too Much. And I would definitely recommend this one if you have read a lot of books, like most of us will have done. Then we've got Talking as Fast as I Can by Lauren Graham, which is her memoir about her time on Gilmore Girls, both the original series as the Netflix episodes. I really like Gilmore Girls and Lauren Graham, which is why I bought it, but I wasn't expecting to love this book as much as I did. We've got You Deserve a Drink by Mamrie Hart, also a YouTuber. What Would Boudica Do? Everyday Problems Solved by History's Most Remarkable Women, which is wonderful. And we have My Friend Fear by Meera Lee Patel. And this is actually a beautiful book full of watercolors on how she deals with anxiety. Then we've got The Brontes Alive in Letters, because I really like the Bronte sisters. I've read a few of the letters in there, but I someday want to read the entire thing. And then there's Mythos by Stephen Fry, which I really enjoyed. Now for a quick break in between all of the books, let's just show you my guinea pigs. You might have heard me talk about them when they're being noisy, because their cage is just next to my bookcases, so I film right next to them. This one is Ziggy, who is most often the troublemaker and is always eating, as he is now. And then over here we have Arthur, who likes to sleep a lot and was probably doing so before I interrupted. Oh, hello Ziggy, there you are. They're really sweet, even when they distract me when I'm filming. Anyway, straight. We've come to the top shelf of the second bookshelf now, and we're continuing with the classics. First we have my little Wuthering Heights collection. Wuthering Heights is my favorite book of all time, and I've got a couple of editions. This beautiful one, and then this classic Penguin one, which I found in Dublin, or actually my boyfriend found in Dublin when we were there in the Ulysses bookshop with, that's a bookshop with rare books. And this is a pretty old one, and I'm never going to read this one because I don't want it to get damaged, but I love having this one. Then we've got another Wuthering Heights over here, so that's number 3, and another one over here, so that's number 4, and my pretty Wuthering Heights mug. Then we've got Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, of course, and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, and also Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. I completely forgotten that I have that one. And we've got The Professor by Charlotte Bronte. So it's a bit of a mishmash of Brontes here, but I tried to sort it according to height, because otherwise you'd just go all over the place, and I really don't like that. Then we've got some more classics in this edition, which is the Wordsworth Classics edition, I believe. We've got The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, which I liked but wasn't blown away by. Call of the Wind and White Fang by Jack London, which I bought because my father wanted me to read these books, but I still haven't, sorry Dad. We've got The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton, which I haven't read yet but still want to do at some point. And then we come to my Jane Austen collection. Sense and Sensibility, read it, liked it. Northanger Abbey, I don't think I've read this one. Then we've got Persuasion, which I have read and liked. And of course Pride and Prejudice, which I also read and loved. This one's my favorite. It's the most well-known one for a reason, I guess. And Emma, which I haven't read yet. Then there are 2 more old Orange Penguin classics. We've got The Importance of Being Earnest and Lady Windermere by Oscar Wilde, or Lady Windermere's fan, sorry. And we've got The Island of Dr. Moreau. I found this at a flea market here in my city in the Netherlands. And at the time I was still watching Orphan Black, which is one of my favorite shows. And this heavily features in Orphan Black, so I was really excited to find it and then to read it, and it's pretty messed up, but I liked it. And then we've got some of the small little black books, I think they're called, and the mint green ones, I don't know what they're called. The Night is Darkening Around Me, which are poems by Emily Bronte, Emily Dickinson here, and The Beautiful Cassandra by Jane Austen. And then we have The Breakthrough by Daphne du Maurier. I read it and really liked it, and now I really want to read more by her. I've been meaning to pick up Rebecca, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. Then we've got The Custard Heart by Dorothy Parker, which I haven't read yet, but plan on doing in August. And Africa's Tarnished Name by Chinua Achebe. I've probably butchered that name, but I really want to read that at some point as well. And then here's another Penguin Books mug. This is actually my boyfriend's, but it looks nice on my classic shelf. And here's a picture of the two of us in the Great Hall. There was an exposition, a Harry Potter exposition in the Netherlands at some point, and we went there and it was a lot of fun. And over here we have Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which of course is not a classic. Don't worry, I don't consider it to be a classic, but it didn't fit on my Harry Potter shelf anymore, which is why it's over here. And now we've actually come to my favorite shelf of my bookcases, which is the Harry Potter shelf. Let's start over here. We've got a tiny replica of Hogwarts, which my boyfriend bought for me a few weeks ago. And then we've got, of course, the entire series. These are the adult editions. I actually don't love them. I'll show you one if you don't know what they look like. I think they're a little bit boring and don't really have that Harry Potter vibe, but I bought these years ago. I think I bought the last one in 2011 because I'd never read these in English because I grew up on them in Dutch. And back then there weren't that many editions available as there are now, because they've come out with a lot of them recently, but they don't even sell these ones anymore, so I am going to keep them because I guess they're now rare. And we've got some bookmarks, Ravenclaw on top because I am a Ravenclaw, and then we have Hufflepuff and the others behind there. We've got some pumpkin juice tea, and then there is the Harry Potter and History of Magic book, which is absolutely gorgeous, both inside and out. Then we have a little owl mug, which is actually on my profile picture everywhere. This has technically nothing to do with Harry Potter, it's just an owl on a mug, but I thought it fit really well with the Harry Potter theme. Then we'll move over here. And up here we've got a Fantastic Beasts tiny coloring book. The Tales of Beedle the Bard, Quidditch Through the Ages, and Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And then there is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban in the old children's edition. It's not the first edition, I wish it was. Prisoner of Azkaban is my favorite out of the Harry Potter books. I actually have a video in which I rank all of the Harry Potter books, so if you want to see that, I'll link it up above. So yeah, that's the only one of those I have, but I found it on a flea market at some point. And then we have all of the Harry Potter books in Dutch. And they're absolutely gorgeous, but this stack is packed in quite tight, so I'm not going to get them out. And then over here we have the 3 illustrated editions that are out at this point. And we also have Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. So yeah, that's the Harry Potter shelf. Moving on to the shelf below, we've got the graphic novel shelf. And eventually there's probably going to be some fantasy here as well when that bleeds over. We also got some drop here. I guess licorice is the closest translation, but it tastes very different and most people who are not from the Netherlands don't like it at all. We have Adulthood is a Myth. I love this one. If you're an adult and you don't like it, I'd definitely read this if I were you. We've got a cool bibliophile candle, which one of my colleagues got me. Then we have Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, I hope I've pronounced it correctly. We've got On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden, which I plan on reading this month. Bloom by Kevin Panetta and Savannah Ganoushou, which is absolutely gorgeous and I love this book. I recommend reading it to anyone who likes a cute LGBT novel. Then we've got Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. I like this but wasn't blown away by it, but I hear there's going to be a film, which is exciting nonetheless. We've got Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, which is magnificent. Mouse by Art Spiegelman, which is really good. Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, which I read last month and really liked. I'm really looking forward to the second volume. A graphic novel of The Picture of Dorian Gray. This is my boyfriend's. I've not read this. I don't even know what it looks like, to be honest. Then we've got Saga Volume 1, 2 and 3 over here. I really like Saga, but the thing I don't like is that these volumes are quite expensive and it really is an ongoing story. But I don't want to spend like 16 euros on the next volume every month or every 2 weeks. Then we've got Fables, Legends in Exile, which is really good, even though the cover looks kind of dull. it's really good and I really want to keep reading. And we have The Sandman, volume 1, 3 and 6. Apparently you can read these out of order. I've only read the first one, but I really want to read the other ones as well. And then there's Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. I haven't read this one yet, but I want to do so this year. Moving on to my first adult contemporary shelf. A cute bookmark a friend of mine gave me when she went to Honduras. We've got Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee, which I have a lot of thoughts on. I think I wrote a blog post on it once. If I remember, I'll put a link to it in the description. We've got On the Other Side by Carrie Hope Fletcher, who's also a YouTuber. Then we've got The Girls by Emma Cline, which I haven't read yet, but really want to. And then The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, which I have read and really didn't like. I also wrote a blog post on that one. I'll link it too if I remember. All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. Amazing. Loved it. Then we have The Cuckoo's Calling, The Silkworm, Career of Evil, and Lethal White, which are the first 4 books in J.K. Rowling's detective series, and these are really good as well. Also, I hate that this one looks different than these 3, but they suddenly decided to change the design halfway through the series. Then we've got my Paul Auster collection, 4321, Invisible, Report from the Interior, The Book of Illusions, the New York Trilogy, The Red Notebook, Timbuktu, and The Music of Chance. Oh, I didn't even know I had that many of them. The New York Trilogy is one of my favorite books of all time, and I wrote my bachelor thesis about that one, and then I decided I wanted to read all of Paul Auster's work, but I definitely haven't yet. I read Timbuktu, I like that one, and I read The Book of Illusions, I think, and I really didn't like that one, so that's a bit of a bummer. And we've got The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes, which I plan on reading this month, and The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro, which I also really want to read because I've heard amazing things about this, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. A Visit from the Goon Squad, which was the first book I read this year, and I really liked it. 100 Years of Solitude, which I haven't read yet, but it's been on my TBR for absolute ages. Same goes for Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. Here we have Heartburn by Nora Ephron, which I really want to read, but haven't yet. And The Rehearsal by Eleanor Catton, which I really liked. And of course Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which is one of my favorite books I read this year. And then over here we have We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I hope I said that right, which is really good. And The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, which I also really liked. I read it for the first time last year and really enjoyed it. Now we've come to the second contemporary adult shelf. The first one is not a contemporary adult. I'm pretty sure it's a children's book. De Gevleugelde Kat, it says in Dutch. Perhaps I should put it on my Dutch shelf then. This is one of my friend's favorite books, and she bought it for me and didn't like the cover, so she put her own cover on it. I haven't read it yet, unfortunately, but I really want to at some point. Then we've got Holding by Graham Norton, which I bought in Dublin, and it's actually signed. I love Graham Norton, I love his show, I love his commentary with the Eurovision Song Contest. He's amazing. Then we have Nutshell by Ian McEwan, History of Wolves by Emily Fridland, which I haven't read yet but really want to. Same goes for Her Body and Other Parties, and for Normal People by Sally Rooney. We've got The Heart of Redness, which I had to read for university, and it was fine, but I didn't love it, so I'm not sure why it's still on here. And The Kite Runner, which I had to read in high school. Asymmetry by Lisa Halliday, which I really want to read. Trainspotting by Irvin Welsh. About a Boy by Nick Hornby, which used to be a lot more orange than it is now. Yeah, you can still see. I read this one in high school as well, and apparently it's been in the sun a little too much. The Secret of the Blue Glass, which is a Japanese children's classic, I believe. I got sent it by Pushkin Press and read it and liked it okay, but I wasn't blown away by it. 5 People You Meet in Heaven, which is one of the first books I reviewed on my blog. Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee, which I haven't read yet, but it's been on here for a really long time. The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje. I read this in high school as well. Wasn't blown away by it, but apparently I still own it. Then we've got My Husband's Wife by Jane Corey. I absolutely didn't like this book, but it was my very first arc, so I wanted to keep it just because of the memories, I guess. Then we've got The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa, which I plan on reading later this month. Then there's The Shock of the Fall by Nathan Filer, which I read a couple of years ago and really liked. Also, the cover is gorgeous, I really like it. Then there's Room, which I read last year, I think, or maybe this year. No, probably last year. Time flies, guys. I loved it. gave it 5 stars, I believe. NW by Zadie Smith, or Northwest. I really wanted to read this one because I wanted to read something by Zadie Smith, but I wasn't blown away by it. But I definitely want to read more for her work. We've got Us by David Nichols. We've got some more David Nichols coming up, but that one was a smaller size, so which is why it's here. The same goes for Everything is Illuminated by Jonathan Safran Foer. I've got another one coming up as well. I haven't read this one yet. I think it might be one of the books that's been on my TBR the longest, but I still haven't gotten around to it. Then we have the Penelopiad. Yeah, that. By Margaret Atwood, which I picked up a few weeks ago, or no, it's a few months ago already. I want to read at some point, and of course The Handmaid's Tale. There's a statue of a seagull. Then we've got One Day by David Nichols, which I really loved. I didn't really like Us that much. It was fine, but not mind-blowing. But I really liked One Day. We Need to Talk About Gavin by Lionel Shriver. I had to read this one for university. Yeah, it's something. It had quite an impact. Let's put it like that. Then we've got Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. This one I also read way at the beginning of my blogging career. I was really blown away by it. Then we have The Rosie Project by Graham Simpson, which I really liked. I gave it 5 stars. And then there came The Rosie Effect, which I used to have, but I unhauled because I hated it. I really didn't like it. And we have The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon, which is also one I had to read in high school, but I want to reread it at some point. Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, which I really liked when I read it, but hasn't remained very memorable for me. And Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder by Joanne Fluke, which is the first book I DNF'd this year, and probably the first book I DNF'd in years altogether. And now we're on to the last shelf, which is still adult contemporary. We've got My Sister's Keeper by Jodie Picoult. I have no idea how to pronounce that name, and I've only just realized that. Anyway, her. I read it, thought it was pretty good, but I'm not really interested in reading more of her work. We've got the Bridget Jones Omnibus, and we have Chocolat by Joanne Harris, which I really loved. Definitely want to reread this. I read it years ago. Peaches for Monsieur le Curé, which is the 3rd book in the Chocolat series. I don't have the 2nd one. And we have Lust for Life by Irving Stone, which is a book about Vincent van Gogh. A while back I saw a film about him and became a little bit obsessed. And I planned on reading this. This is one of my parents' books, but it's on my shelves. But I haven't gotten around to it yet. And then there's the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel by Society, which is also technically my parents' book, but I don't think they realize I have it. Sorry, parents. This was a 5-star read for me last year. I really enjoyed it a lot. Then we have my Jenny Colgan collection, the Little Beach Street Bakery books, and some of the others. I really enjoyed these books. I haven't read all of them. I still have to read The Summer Seaside Kitchen and The Loveliest Chocolate Shop in Paris. But I have to be in a specific mood for these books. Then we've got my Jill Mansell books, or at least the ones I have here, because I have about 10 of them at my parents' home. They're all in Dutch. And then here is my little Roald Dahl nook. Matilda, which was my favorite book when I was growing up and is still one of my favorite books. Collected short stories of Roald Dahl. Kiss Kiss, which is also short stories, so they are probably also in the collected short stories. Then we've got the BFG, and then that one is the Dutch version of, I guess it's called James and the Giant Peach, I'm not sure. And then over here we have Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls, which is a wonderful book. So yeah, those are all my books. I hope you enjoyed my bookshelf tour. Let me know if you saw any of your favorites on my shelves, or if there are any books missing that should be on there according to you. Thanks so much for watching. Please give it a like if you like this video, and subscribe if you want to see more of me. And have a wonderful day. Bye! And the boys also say goodbye. They're finally sleepy again.